All right, Tim Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Fantastic to be here. I'm almost too excited. You've come all the way up from the Gold Coast to visit me here in Brisbane, and it's great to have you in my home.
I have, and thanks for the invite. It's great to be here, and really looking forward to a discussion today about not just your service career, but your life before the military, the identity change of joining, and the adjustment after you left Army. So thanks for the opportunity.
Pleasure to be here.
So going back prior to your joining up Army, Tim, you're an athlete, an amateur athlete. You joined fairly late compared to most people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I in the 90s was getting into what's called they call it UFC these days, but back then it was just no rules fights. It was probably only legal in Queensland, and in biker bars. I mean, the crowd looked tougher than we were. And I was a wrestler, so I'd love to take things to the ground. But when you did that, people didn't want to see that, so they'd boo and tell you to get lost. But I really enjoyed it. It was challenging. It brought about all the things that I wanted, but it certainly didn't pay any money. And when the government started a scheme in 2004 called the Direct Recruiting into Special Forces, the DRSF scheme. And that they were looking for sort of ex-athletes that could pass the IQ test, the aptitude test, the psych test, and then do all the basic stuff the military does for the infantry, and then prepare them for Special Forces selection. Up until that point, you had to be in an infantry battalion for 2 years, and then you could apply for SF. And we were the very first DRSF 1 to go on that. And it was exciting. There was 70 guys that were in there, and the cutoff age was 30, and I was like 29 and a half. And I thought, well, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, but I'm thinking maybe I'd regret if I didn't do it. So I jumped in, and I had a bit of inner conflict in the way that when I was swearing in, the guy said, "Is there anyone here with second thoughts?" And I'm like, crap, first time in my life I'm actually doubting myself. So there was a lot of inner conflict in me whether I should do it or not. But I really needed a job because martial arts wasn't paying the bill. And yeah, so like I said, they called me Old Man Tomo because I was the oldest there, and didn't quite sit. But at the end of the day, from the 70 that started, probably less than 15 got through, and there was a certain amount of luck that got me through, but mostly just there was a lot of guys fitter, faster, smarter, stronger than I was. But I think there's just something about growing up in the 70s, just getting beaten up at school every day that just makes you tough, and it's no big deal because it's just what happens. And yeah, so quite proud to say I made it through to those, that final on the very first one, because at that point the Defence Force or the Army was highly resistant to this scheme, because understand that all the people in there had been in a regular battalion for 2 years, so we were considered civilian queue jumpers. Yeah,
yeah, of course.
And so we met a lot of resistance. And to this day, we've got a statistic at the infantry school of infantry training in Singleton that we have 300%. Coral platoon has 300% more injuries than any other platoon, and the head medic was saying, "What's going on with Coral platoon?" And then it finds out that they didn't actually give us any protective gear, so no elbow pads or knee pads. So we'd be crawling through the kangaroo shit, and then our elbows would swell to the size of rock melons. I'm not kidding. Like you couldn't get two hands around some guys' elbows because you crawl through the kangaroo crap and it gets in there, and then you get bursitis. Mm-hmm. So we were all going down with that, plus a bunch of other injuries, because these corporals had decided that they were going to stop this scheme. This scheme wasn't going to work.
Right?
And some of these corporals, we later find out, tried to get into SF and then got knocked back. So you could see how they would view these guys that were coming through now, and they didn't want that to happen. So as a result, they're now since the first one, they've structured it differently. There's a lot less injuries. There's a lot more sort of thought into things. But just being there on that sort of day one, that sort of one of those things you look back on and you think you're quite proud of that time in your life where you just put everything on the line to do it.
And you were not only older than most guys, you also had a relationship, in fact, a wife who was pregnant about the time you joined up.
Yeah. So funny story is my boy was due to be born on my Special Forces selection course. So they said, you got a choice to make, Tim. You can either see your son being born or go on Special Forces selection. Now, up until that point, I'd worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life to get to that place. And if I was to miss that selection, I'd have to spend a year somewhere else before I could come back to it. And I had to think, I really want to see my son being born, but what's the most important thing here? The most important thing is my son. Okay, it's our firstborn. And if I was looking at this perspective from his set of eyes, what would he be? What would be his needs? Would he need me to be there when he's born, or does he need a dad with a job? So I got my wife all the help I could get for her, and I said to the guys that I'm committing to the selection, and they let me have a phone so I could sort of keep updated with what was going on. But yeah, I did selection knowing I was going to miss the birth of my firstborn. But that's kind of what they're looking for. You've got to commit 100%, and then you might start getting some concessions. So I made a point of introducing my wonderfully pregnant wife to some of the officers, and they were very accommodating. And I remember I got a message on my phone saying the water's broken, it's all happening, and it was a particular. I mean, every day's hard, but this one was hard day. Just a lot of on your guts, crawling, going over cactuses and everything, and I was looking up at the green canopy thinking, I'm going to regret this day the rest of my life. And then when we were setting up the nighttime harbour and I was putting out the claymores, one of the officers come up to me and says, oh, Tim, how's it going? I'm like, yeah, no worries. He says, and he goes, how's Shannon going? And I'm like, yeah, I just got the message, she's about to give birth. And then he says, you want to go see her? And when he said that, I automatically put my left foot forward and I had my clenched fist behind my back. Because what usually happens on especially selection is they say, oh, you're thirsty, you want to drink a water, mate? Too bad you can't have one. Oh, you're tired, let's get on the truck. The truck drives off. So they're used to offering you things and then taking it away. And this was the one thing I'm like, I'm about to knock this guy out, if he messes with me on this one point. And I'm just staring at him, not saying anything. And he sort of just leans forward. No, Tim, I'm serious. We can make this happen? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And the great thing about the Army is that when an officer gets on the phone and starts swearing, stuff starts happening really quickly. So I had two different vehicles. A big truck came and grabbed me. Another truck came and grabbed all my, weapons and classified gear. We screamed through the bush. I get to the hospital. I don't even know I've still got cam paint on my face. I'm running through the hospital, big sweaty guy in cams and cam paint. I get there, and I do manage to see my son being born, which was amazing. And then there was complications, and Shannon, for some reason, thought she was going to die during birth. I didn't know this. And so she had to have surgery. And I followed them in and I spoke to the doctors before when I said, make sure you look after my wife. And I waited at the door for probably 4 hours. But that's stupid me. That's the door they go in. That's not the door they go out. So 4 hours later, I see this doctor walking off to the car park And I call him over. He says, no, that, your wife's fine. That was done hours ago. And so I managed to get eyes on, the wife. She's okay. Boy's okay. And then I go straight back out to the field where my platoon is still doing selection. They probably had a bit more sleep than me that night. And then that day we started demarcation, which is 3 days, 3 nights, no sleep, no food, and lots of carrying heavy stuff. And I got sick because I was so fatigued, but I was really, really happy that I could see my son being born. And everyone's got sort of the cross they have to bear. And that one I bore quite gladly. It did make stuff harder, but it certainly made life a lot richer.
And that would have done great things for your commitment to service and to the Army, given that they did give you that slight reprieve during course.
Yeah, no, it was. It felt like it was meant to happen. Yeah.
Tim, I'll just reset this recording right here. Right, so that was selection course, and of course, if you want, you can just tighten that bad boy up on top if it's dragging a bit.
No, we're good.
If so, following a selection course, of course, there's a reinforcement cycle as the rest of the training special forces go through. How was your fit within Army, within the culture, given you were a bit more mature age, you had greater life experiences, baby on the way, in a lot of ways you were more mature or advanced than some of the other young guys. How was your experience fitting into the Army?
Culturally, I wouldn't say I was a particularly good fit. For a number of reasons, and it's not all, Army's fault. Part of me, and something I've learnt about me is, I can communicate, but then part of me is not listening as well. So the saying 90% of all communication is nonverbal. That part of you that doesn't listen, or people pick up that you're impervious to their input, comes out in that space. And I wasn't aware of it then. But also, I wasn't the type that went out drinking, because I had a family to look after. I also had a spirituality which, made it easy for, I guess, people to make fun of because it was not understood. And, I got along with the team around me, but it was very easy to be the guy that, people put shit on. Yeah. So, and it wasn't all Army and it wasn't all me, but there was a real conflict there as far as culture goes. I think it was like a real testing ground for me to see how much I was going to sort of see how much of this problem is me and how much of this problem is, outside of me. In 2009, we went to Afghanistan, and I had a real sense that I was going to die before I left. And it was true, because a part of me did die when I was over there. And that was the part that was possibly a bit more, the world's about me, not about being connected to others. And it was a hard lesson to sort of to change that part of me, and that's why I'm sort of grateful for the Army, because if I was in a job where you could clock off at the end of the day, have a few beers, you can hang on to your the parts of you that are stopping you reaching your full potential, but in that situation, I had to change, and I did, and a part of me did have to die. For that other part to sort of step up and live.
And your experiences there in Afghanistan and what you demonstrated changed the way you were perceived from your peers. So previously you were the old guy with, didn't drink, spiritual practice, a bit different. But that changed after your experience in
massively.
Afghanistan.
Yeah. Because before then, like I said, very easy to have your character assassinated. And interesting thing about Special Forces culture is it's a very imbalanced human dynamic. So any group of humans, you will have, males, females, you'll have dominant personalities, passive personalities, you'll have talkers, you'll have listeners. But if you could picture like 27 million people, you pull out all the blokes. Then you pull out all the, then you pull out all the blokes that have a really high physical discipline. And then out of those blokes have a really high intellect. And then out of those blokes have the guys that have a never say die attitude. Okay. You have them all in one room. So on a good day, you can do frickin' anything. Okay. On a bad day, it's like a off-leash dog park with a bunch of, male undersexed dogs that just want to fight each other. Okay. So insecure alpha males feel the need to push someone else down. Okay. And I'd suffered a lot of character assassination within that unit because of particular insecure alphas and they feel the need to push others down. But when Afghanistan happened and I didn't just do a reasonable job, I did a bloody good job. And people were actually coming up to me afterwards saying, Tomo, we're sorry, we believed all the bullshit and we know it's not true now. So that was like a massive turnaround point. I was really ready to spend the rest of my working career in the army because I finally had a team around me that could see me for who I really was and what I was capable of. Just because, I was quite a happy dude, smiled when work started getting hard, but people misunderstood, my smiling, happy nature as I hadn't worked hard enough, because for them to do what I'd done, they had to sort of sell their soul. And they were like dead-eyed, really stuffed on the inside. But I'm like, this brings me more alive when I'm working hard. But they mistook my sort of carefree, fun nature for a form of weakness. Yeah.
And of course, following Afghanistan, that was a pivotal experience for you. How did that change your perception of and your doubts about your fit and whether you're committed to Army, going through that experience and being validated and having those people support you through that experience? Where were you then compared to where you were years earlier during selection?
Within myself or compared to?
Within yourself.
There was a certain piece that came from the people around me actually know me now, as opposed to all people knew me beforehand as what other people said about me. Okay, and of course I had my core group of brothers that were there through thick and thin, but then, it's quite hard when you have a question mark above your head, because if insecure people feel like that question mark's going to go on to them if they talk to you or hang out with you. So I was given the invisible treatment for a period of time, because I had this question mark over my head because of some very successful character assassination. It was easy for people to do that because I had, a spiritual discipline. So other people would say, "Oh, he's got God in his head. That's unsure. How about we just label him as a so and so and so and so." So then once I could prove myself and do everything, and here's a funny thing, like, some of the big tough dudes that, had the tats, could bench more than me in the gym, all that sort of stuff, wouldn't even shake my hand. When the bullets come in, they're hiding under the vehicle. Skinny guys like me out the front, I had to see that for myself, because people telling me that, "Oh, Tim, you're a shit soldier," I kind of started believing it. And all these guys that looked the part, I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's what it is, But then when actually push comes to shove, and you can see it for your own eyes, then all the stuff that you thought was important just gets tossed out until it actually comes to the actual. There's a lot of power is hidden power. I've discovered. It's not obvious, and sometimes people who don't have real power like to make it obvious to try and compensate. So I always think power comes in, strength, toughness. When the going gets tough, the tough get going, as opposed to let's just look tough, and then when the going gets tough, we make an excuse or hide under a vehicle. So it was somewhat frustrating, but incredibly liberating to have that. To have that sort of the myths dispelled. The people actually who were saying these things were seen for what they were. The old saying, every time you throw mud, you lose ground. So those people creating those things were that to the point where even the RSM investigated some of these allegations and realised it was just he said, she said, and then after deployment, all those people, there was only probably one main individual that was effectively spreading it, but then lies become truths, and that person was seen for what they were, and I felt liberated, and that's, like I said, I was ready to spend the rest of my days in that unit because I just felt like I was known, somewhat different from the mainstream, but still good, man. Like he's strange, but he's no stranger type thing.
Yeah, it's funny how it takes those sort of experiences and tests almost to bring out people's character, and I think more importantly for others to accept people who are a bit different in the military, because it is such a homogeneous, culture and fit in society often.
Yeah, well, you said a mouthful there, Matt. You said it just before.
Really about accepting.
No, it was something like bad experiences don't build character; they reveal it. Yeah, I'm not saying that right, but something about when you're going through a hard time, it doesn't build your character; it reveals your character.
It does. Yeah, it does, and it takes that sometimes. And it's almost as if people can't be given credit until they go through that experience, and then it's revealed. Which sounds like your experience there.
Yeah, and it's funny where real power sits, and it's not always with that guy that's pretending to be tough.
So coming out of Afghanistan, you felt like the army was a good fit. Special forces were you, or was you for the rest of your career, but you later decided to leave. Yeah, well, and this is not something I've spoken about in many years, but especially not publicly. But we just had a successful deployment to Afghanistan. Okay. We have a end of deployment get together, and I paid my money to do it. We were going to go on Sydney Harbour on a boat, right? And the guy in charge at the time wanted strippers on the boat. Now, my agreement with my wife is I don't do anything away from her that I wouldn't do if she was right there next to me, right? So I don't agree with strippers, but I'm a big boy. If they're at one end of the boat, I'll be at the other. It's not going to stop me having a drink with my mates, right? And my wife knows that. But here's the thing, some of the wives of the diggers found out about strippers being on this boat and called the boss of the Commandos, and obviously shit rolls downhill. How's this podcast for swearing and all that? That's fine. It's fine. Yep. Yeah. All right. Some keep it clean, some don't. But anyway, so the point I'm trying to say is shit rolls downhill. The big guy gets onto our boss and tells him you can't have strippers on the boat. And he pulls a whole company out. And the thing is, Special Forces soldiers don't need orders. They just need the commander's intent. It's my intent that we do this, and we're smart enough to figure out, okay, we can do this like this, right? And it was pretty clear his intent was that he was ropeable, that he couldn't have strippers on the boat. And then after he's torn strips out of everybody, right at the end, he goes, right, who here has a problem with fucking strippers? And I literally felt something on my shoulder, like another part of me grabbed my shoulder and go, Tim, there is never a convenient time to be yourself. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, you know what? I've got like less than 2 seconds to make to say what I really believe in. And so, yeah, up went my hand. And it was like Moses through the Red Sea. Everyone went, one hand up and a whole group of guys. And this officer was looking at me going, really? And it was at that moment that I realized that, these guys, courage, okay, let's not make it about the guys. Let's make it about courage. Courage is like intelligence. There's a lot of different forms of it, okay? There's the courage to pick up a rifle and fight for your country.
And then there's the courage to actually be your true self, you know. And just like, you know, you pick up a rifle and be down the rifle rounds, but can you pick up a rifle and do it when there's opposition? Okay. Can you be yourself when you're just walking around doing nothing? Or can you be yourself when there's a cost to it, when there's something at risk? I remember afterwards, a lot of guys came up to me and says, "Oh, I wanted to put my hand up too." And I'm like, "You fucking didn't." No. And
you wanted to.
Yeah, you wanted to. Yeah, that's right.
Another.
Yeah. I wanted to help you on that ridge line when you were shooting back. Yeah, but and I could see that the officer did respect me for that thing, but didn't stop him transferring my ass to a whole new company 2 weeks later. Now, that might not seem like much getting transferred, but as a private, when you get transferred to a whole new company, you're right at the bottom rung. And I'd worked very hard within my company to get up to a point where I had a good team around me. They knew me, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I got transferred to this new company. They were about to go to Afghanistan. I was really happy about that because I got a chance to prove myself, right? Anyway, the officer of this new company and some of the NCOs stand around me saying, "We've effing heard about you, C-word." And I'm like, I know what's going to happen next. Okay. I'm not scared of dying, but it's the guys I don't care about that go through the door first. Okay. And yeah, I'll get a good write-up. He was a good soldier, blah, blah, blah. But if I'm going to die, I want people to miss me afterwards. I'm not going to just be, you know, bullet fodder getting sent through the door the first time every time. And I'm like, I can't fight a whole army. And even though I thought this was my job for life and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, I knew that if I was to stay in that job, I'd be agreeing with their sense of my worth. And I disagreed with their sense of my worth. And on that principle alone, I left the job of my dreams. And there's a few things, you know, I'm pretty sure I had some undiagnosed PTSD rattling around. So I left not knowing what the hell I was going to do. I felt completely lost. And, you know, what does a soldier do when he feels lost? Well, let's just work hard and ignore everything and think that busyness compensates for lack of purpose. And so, yeah, I moved back up to Brisbane, whole family, and started, boot camp, you know, outdoor boot camp business, you know, and that was great. Lots of sort of fun to be had, but there was two sort of parts of me. There was a part that I'd sort of show others, and then there was the part that I'd try and hide. And it was creating an incredible imbalance to the point where, you know, I couldn't speak to my wife without drinking, you know, 6 to 12 beers each night. You know, it was affecting everything, but I felt that if I just kept quiet about it, I was doing everyone a favor. But me not talking about it or not seeking help was really damaging the people I cared most about. And that's a really hard pill for a bloke to swallow. You know, I love my family. How can I be the source of their pain? You know, if there's a problem, I fix the problem. I'm not the problem. You know, I love these people. How can I be the problem? You know, I'm not a bad person. So,
Tim, you'd been through quite a lot, and you'd gone through quite a lot by that point in time, and you come out the other side of it. Perhaps some undiagnosed PTSD, being ostracised from your unit for being who you are and showing courage. That's a hell of a lot going on. Did you give yourself any credit and any recognition of what you'd achieved and what you'd been through?
Well, it wasn't until the sort of the duration of time went on, because once I started making some awkward steps forward into my own recovery and started getting some sort of peace around things, I started realizing geez, there's a lot of other people in this scenario. And so, the thing that took me years to figure out, I could help other people in far less time, right? And I started working at Mates for Mates, and I had this crazy goal, Matt, because we'd lost about 40 blokes to bullets in Afghanistan, but we'd lost over 400 to suicide, okay? And not many people know about that statistic. So in my mind, working numbers, I'm like, if I can save 40 blokes from suicide, I am going to die happy, right? And I had no training in this at whatsoever. I just had walked experience, and there was one thing I understood that made the impact, and I'll share that in a second. But that goal of saving 40 blokes before I die actually happened within 12 months, because I discovered that pain, it doesn't matter if it's emotional or physical. It really doesn't. It'll get to a certain point where it stops just being pain and transforms into loneliness. The one thing no mammal does really well with, because we're meant to be social creatures, interconnected. I'm part of you, you're part of me, we're in this together. But if I feel like I'm out of the herd, if I feel like I'm alone, then everything's a threat, because everything is a threat. And the magic word the magic phrase I was listening for when I was talking to all these veterans was, shit, I thought I was the only one going through this. That is step one, breaking the isolation. Then it's a case of connecting them into the right kind of healers. Now, breaking that isolation, knowing you're not alone, is very powerful, but problem with a lot of veterans is they form these anti-social social groups, okay? So the only time I can really let myself out and be myself is around these group of people, okay? But what are you going to do for the other 6.5 days of the week? Excuse me. So I learnt that we had to, once the isolation was broken, we had to hand them into a proper set of healers. And when I say healers, I'm talking GP, psychologists, psychiatrists, yoga groups, men's groups, counsellors, that sort of suite. And something I discovered painfully was there's good news and bad news when it comes to healing. The good news is, when you find the right healer, it takes far less time than what you think it would take. Far less time. The bad news is, healers are like coffee shops. There's two in every corner, but you've got to work really hard to find the one that works for you. And no one told me that going into it. It took me 6 years to find the right psychologist. No one told me that. I could have well given up. So what I tell people is just that the journey isn't going to be your healing. The journey is going to be finding the healer, and just that knowledge alone would have made my journey a whole lot easier. So basically, I'm trying to be the person that I wanted to be around, and it was basically just an awareness of a system that I had no awareness around. And it's okay if they're crap. It's nothing personal. You just go on to the next one. So if ideally, you want to find someone who is where you want to be. So whatever injury you've got, mental, physical, find someone who has had it and they're now successful in whatever they're doing. Because there's plenty of people with, let's say, in my case, PTSD, that are doing it very unsuccessfully. And they've got all the advice in the world and they love company. And you can spend years wallowing in that circle of, well, at least we're in this together, but it's not helpful and it doesn't move you forward. Find the people that have successfully navigated the space that you want to get into, and they will generally refer you to the right type of healers. Yeah,
that's not easy, right? Because in service, this is something I've dealt with only in the last few years from my partner's perspective towards getting the right help, getting the right doctor, the rest of it. When I'm in service, the first doctor, nurse, medic, psychologist I'm referred to, that's it. In, out, transactional. They give you the service or the drug or the pharmaceuticals, whatever it is, and out I go. I've never questioned when I'm in service the quality being provided or that particular individual. and I've never gone looking for the right fit, be it expertise or be it with the right personality or makeup that works with me personally. So this is a 180 shift for me and for a lot of people, I think. And the piece before it, reaching out and asking for that help, is equally enormously big. You're huge now in spreading that message and connecting to people. How long did it take you to make that change and to be able to reach out yourself?
Well, we'd be having this conversation in a jail cell if I didn't reach a poignant point in my healing journey. I'd reached rock bottom. I said, I need help. I went to this psychologist. Now, he wasn't just ignorant of how to be a good healer. He was apathetic, you know. He just didn't give a shit, right? And I'm telling him about all this shit within service, and then right at the end he goes, so do you think it was a problem with your mum and dad? Like after I'd shared all this crap that I'd been hanging on to, and I saw his psychologist degree hanging on the wall behind him, and I knew it was a glass frame. I was going to grab that glass frame and force it down his throat. I saw myself doing it, you know, looking into his eyes as I was killing this dude. And in my state of isolation, I justified that because I was saving every other person coming in here the pain of that I'd have to go through of going, this guy shouldn't be in a position as a healer. And when I saw that like red flag crack, and I'm like, I'm the strongest guy I know. How many other people have gotten screwed over by this system of ineffective healing? You know what? I've got to stay clean and make a way. I don't know how, but I've got to make a way for all those other people that want to come through. And that's when I actually saw them. Then I'm like, there are people left and right of me willing me on right now that I possibly haven't even met yet, that if I can make a way forward for me, I'm going to make a way forward for them. It might take me a year, 10 years, but you know what? That's the amount of time I'm going to be able to save them, you know? So to me, that's like the closest thing we've got to a human superpower. Imagine one conversation with you saving me 10 years of my life. Damn, that's the most valuable thing we own. And that's sort of when I started seeing those people left and right of me, that's when I started making decisions that were more connected into the community. When I was alone and isolated, then it was me that was wronged. I'm going to kill this guy and I can justify myself doing that. But when I'm connected to the whole, all of a sudden, it's like you can think with the benefits of the many. But yeah, scary as hell, and there's still a bit of, you know, anger in me towards the system that's supposed to be there to help, but then it don't help. Well, it's very hard to get. It's harder than they tell you to get help, and you tend to think because they've got that certificate on the wall, yes, they may have worked very hard to get that, but it doesn't make them an automatic good healer. So allow yourself, you know, make an appointment with maybe 6 of them and then check them out one at a time. Or like I said, ask that person who's been there before you, and they'll certainly save you a lot of time searching.
So I'm interested in the change of perspective from being in service, particularly in some parts of the military, and being extremely self-reliant, and in fact taking the perspective that doing anything else would be to let the team down, and then making that transformation to reaching out and getting help once we're out of uniform. So I'm just going to read a little something you said about 6 years ago in a media piece here, and I'll just read it word for word because I think it's extremely powerful. So you said the most powerful thing we have on this planet is not a weapon, it's actually a conversation. You said the thing that makes for a good Defence Force member is that you keep going even when you're hurting. You don't ask for help, you don't accept help, because if you accept help, that means you're weak. And if you're weak, you let down the team, and you'll die before you let down the team. And that's what's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that is very, very true. These days, I sort of explain it in the way that, you know, if you saw me in the gym, you might be lifting more than me, but you wouldn't call me weak. I'm in the gym. I've got a desire to strengthen myself, right? When that same desire to strengthen myself puts me into the psychologist's office, puts me into the yoga, puts me into the men's group, puts me into the counsellor, puts me into the dietitian. I want everything in my life to get stronger, not just my bench press. And then conversely, if you want to look at it in the negative space, you're working in a team of 5. One of them underperforms by 20%. He's still part of the team, but everyone has to pick it up 5%. So if you strengthen yourself by 20%, you're actually benefiting everyone else in that team. So the best thing you can do for others is strengthen yourself. Okay, and once you realize that, then and this is where leadership needs to come in, where someone, like myself, say, hey, look, I saw areas I needed to improve. I developed strength in those areas. I admitted that I wasn't as strong as I wanted to be, and the roof didn't fall on my head because I sought help. You know what I mean? And then they go, oh, look, the roof didn't fall down on his head because he actually admitted there was something that needed, again, that's where in the situation, in the defense, if you ask for help, that means you're weak, and if you're weak, you let the team down. There's a time and a place for that, but that headspace doesn't serve you when there's a time for healing. It's the old time and place for everything. Yeah, there's a time to muscle up, get the job done. This country is made great by that, but you're not serving your country if there's something that needs that's imbalanced in you and you're not fixing it.
I think that's a fascinating point. As we're trained, there's a place for situational leadership, behaviour in different situations. But making that transition, us former serving members and veterans can talk about that, but making that transition when you're in uniform, in service, in a culture that focuses on one thing, that's incredibly hard to make that switch unless you're supported by the leadership and supported by the organisation, truly.
Oh, and it's a very different kind of leadership when you are looking at the whole picture. It's a very simple form of leadership to go, do A, do B, okay? And all we want to know about is that. We don't want feedback on anything else. It's all about performance, okay? So I always sort of thought the way they did things in the Army sort of compensated for poor leadership in the way that there wasn't anything, you're expected to bring the goods, but then to the sacrifice of everything else in your life, okay? So my family came very secondary to the job, okay? And of course, there's a time to do work, but when you have, let's say there's a poor boss that is struggling to do his job well, then that makes a very, select windows of viewing for the people underneath him. And the Army sort of had this thing where, if you don't measure up in those spots, you're no good, okay? Whereas if you just, if a leader was to say, listen, how about we look at the full picture and see how we can develop everything, you would have you'd have a lot more longevity of these people in their workspace, as opposed to who can eat the most buckets of crap for the longest. Oh, look, he ate 10 buckets of crap. He's a tough guy. Let's all be like him,
Balance, and
balance, exactly.
Longevity and taking care of the whole person. That's the conversation, isn't it?
Mm.
Tim, you've been very active in veteran support after leaving Army, initially as a liaison to Mates for Mates, and then you did a tremendous trek, in fact, where you raised $127,000 for veteran support.
Well, we actually raised twice that amount because we split the amount between Gallipoli Medical Research Foundation,
yes,
but we also then gave another cheque for $127,000 to Queensland Brain Institute.
Right.
So and when I say we, it certainly wasn't just me. I was part of a team of about 15 trekkers, and we're all raising funds for Gallipoli Medical Research Foundation, GMRF, and the Queensland Brain Institute. I had the honour of handing over the cheque, my role was just as part of the team, not I certainly wasn't the main person. There was some I'm trying to. Yes, I was part of the team, but I wasn't like it wasn't just me making that sort of money. I was simply glad to sort of be there, and then I was asked to speak at certain corporate events, and we raised funds like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You've had ongoing development now, or involvement, I should say, with Gallipoli Medical Research Foundation, particularly in the last couple of years.
Yes, no, I'm their veteran ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
They have, I would say, and I've dealt with a lot of smart people, real confidence is when you can change the way you apply yourself. Because if you've got a point of focus, and that point of focus, let's say it's in the veteran community, say, well, we only speak this way. Well, guess what? We have to. Then they say, well, we have to learn that language so we can then talk to them and engage with them because we really want to know what's going on. A lot of people would go, well, I've done 8 years of research myself. Here's. I'm going to talk to you like I talk to everyone, and you don't get a real insight into that, and then therefore your results are skewed because you're not speaking the language of that particular group. So Gallipoli Medical, we're about to fly down to Canberra this weekend and launch the Go Beyond program, which is there to help veterans once they're out of defence. And the great thing about this is it is tailored. So when you say, oh, I might be having trouble transitioning, here's 20 books on what could be the possible solution, and people are like, yeah, whatever. But these guys, again, they speak the veteran language, and you do a questionnaire called the MCALM, where in the language that we speak, ask certain questions, okay? And then from those questions, they then tailor what exactly you need. So once you've answered those questions, you get a tailored response about, okay, it could be communication that is that blockage. It could be a sense of purpose that is the blockage. You know, there is these missing gaps that we don't even know, we can't articulate, that the questionnaire in our language draws out from you, which is just amazing, because a lot of people will say, I don't have a lack of purpose, so I'm feeling really anxious. I can't sleep. I'll go to the doctor. The doctor will say, look, here's a bunch of pills. You take those pills, but the sense of purpose goes completely unaddressed. Okay, so the Go Beyond program really taps into the base part of what it is for a veteran to be transitioning. Yeah.
Yeah. And the MCALM tool's available online. I did it a few months ago, in fact, myself, and I was super encouraged by it, the fact that it's just a practical tool set that hones in on those areas for improvement. And I understand, speaking to the CEO there at Gallipoli, that the Go Beyond is going to target onto those interventions to actually improve those areas and work on those areas for people who've undertaken the MCALM tool. So great to see a practical tool out there.
Oh, yeah, finally. And it is online, and a lot of blokes would probably shy away from that. So, and what usually happens, and this is what I told the Gallipoli guys, you have to promote this to the partners, because the people that really need the help, they're just in survival mode. Yeah. And the problem is they've probably reached out to help before, and I've had so many guys say this to me, oh, Tim, we've reached out for help, and guess what? Help didn't help. In fact, it made it worse. And I can completely get when people do that, because it takes such an effort to go, you know what, yeah, I need help, and then get disappointed in that, not going to do it again. And that's where, like I said, I would have almost ended up in jail until I had that realization there's other people in the same situation. So I said, with this online tool, yes, it's online, it's hard to sort of reach into a computer for help, but if you get this is why we've got to target the partners of these people, because it's often the partners that are the ones that are the ones that are reaching out and wanting more, for not just to not accept the current behaviour, but and there's also a bunch of resources on there that the partner can access too, which is how I kind of started my initial thing. Was the missus said, oh, we didn't know there was these resources available, let's give them a go, and then the ball started rolling.
And Tim, we'll link to the online MCALM tool in the show notes, but coming back to the partners, I mean, we wear the uniform you and I, we've been there. We separate from defence, and the veteran story is often about the individual. The family, to me, wears the burden quite often, and they're as involved as we are. You were married when you joined Army, and you've said before that it's only the fact that she knew you before you joined up.
Oh, yeah.
That's what helped get you through those first few years of your relationship when you're in Army and then beyond it. How's that journey gone for you in terms of being involved in the relationship and the process of making that identity shift back out and making the family shift back out?
What often happens is the guy will join, he'll do stuff in defence, he'll come back from a particular deployment, whatever, and the partner goes, this is not the person I married. Okay. That happened to me after East Timor. And luckily, the wife stayed with me. We got help, healing, and we sorted it out. But what often happens is the guy will come back a different person from the person that was initially married. Then they'll get a divorce. And then they'll remarry, and this new partner has no idea of who this person really is. But, once a month he might just be blue. Once every now and then he might punch a wall. That's just sort of who he is. Whereas that's sort of the person he's changed into. So you can form these new relationships, and it's sort of, because there's no point of reference, you think it's kind of normal, this sort of behaviour. So I was fortunate at the time to have a wife that stuck with me through that and, get me as close as possible back to where I was. Now, I got out of defence 2010, and we'd been together for the last 8 years. We've separated, but at that point, that wasn't a defence-related sort of issue. Luckily, it's not a. How do I say this? It's not a defence-related issue that we're breaking up over.
And Tim, involving the partners in the transition process, you've dealt with many and helped many who've come out of uniform. What's your advice? What are your thoughts about involving the families in the transition process earlier on?
Well, this is where a lot of the early prevention tools that Gallipoli Medical have made come into effect. And it really comes down to asking the right questions, because there's a lot in that involving the family, but having a few fridge magnets that have references to resources go a long way, and because the hardest thing is when people feel they don't have options, then they get really frustrated, and they start with the extra stress. Their tolerance level really sort of shrinks. But if you can say, oh, look, here's a few options, we'll try that, that sort of keeps people moving. But yeah, if I had my way, I'd probably have the partners in on the transition seminars that they run, because the person going through the experience can be so sort of, oh crap, I'm getting out in a bit, and all this new information isn't actually sort of registering as much, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I understand that is an option now, that is occurring now, having the partners there.
Oh, it is, great.
Agree with you 100%. My perspective getting out was I had 3 weeks because I had a job offer coming up, and I'd been away 5.5 months that year flying with Air Force, and the brain was mainly about conducting those missions safely and then, hey, what's the process to get out the door? Where's the form? Blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And I was relying on the transition experience and transition seminars I'd done 2 years ago, 8 years ago. Like, I know what to do. Everything else, kick that can down the road. So really, talking to my wife, I think my transition process was relatively straightforward, I'd say. But speaking to her and just getting her big picture, I was like, hey, Matt, what about this? You didn't talk about this. You aren't thinking about those things. If I didn't involve her, and I really could have involved her more, but if I didn't have those conversations with her and rely on her judgment and her needs as a half of our family relationship, I would have been in such a worse position.
Yeah, well, that conversation alone, I'm sure, is resonating with a lot of people listening.
And, even talking about it now, it just opens my eyes up more to how important this is to involve partners. And, I'm probably a bit embarrassed to say that for most of my career, that wasn't my mindset. My mindset was, I'm Matthew Dank, I'm the military pilot, I'm the Navy aviator, the Air Force pilot. I know how to do this, I'm trained, I can do it. Yep, family's over here, but I'm doing the job there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not something even now that I can integrate comfortably, that I can, feel my way around and talk my way around without thinking, without feeling uncomfortable and odd.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, to be that focused, and let me just break it down on a physiological level, yes, the job does need you to be 100% in that moment. You can't be worried about other things at that time. But the problem is, for that sort of focus and that sort of work rate, it produces a lot of cortisol in the system. Okay, cortisol is not necessarily a bad thing. Gets you out of bed in the morning, keeps you going. But too much for too long, it starts affecting our adrenal system. Okay, and people start going into what's called adrenal fatigue. Now, the biggest turning point in my life wasn't the psychologist. It was going to an endocrinologist who had worked with veterans before, and he says, Tim, I've been seeing this since Vietnam. High levels of cortisol for too long drive your testosterone levels into the dirt, okay? And when you have too much testosterone can make you roid raging aggressive, but too little makes you overly reactive. You're always tired, but you can't sleep properly. You turn into the Incredible Hulk. It's like you start using anger as your source of energy. Or if you've ever seen that sort of cranky warrant officer that blows up at the drop of a hat, that is classic adrenal fatigue. And when I went and how many of all the blokes listening, when's the last, we all know testosterone is important, right? You and I, yeah, it's important. Okay, when's the last time you had it checked? Probably never, right? And I was no different. And then when I had mine checked, I went to an endocrinologist who actually knew, and he says, you pretty much have to ignore what the GP says, okay? Because right now in Australia, it's one size fits all for testosterone, whether you're 18 or 80, okay? And for you to do what you've done in your work, you would have had to have a higher level of testosterone anyway. So you can get your readings, and you might be sort of towards the low end of what would be considered normal, but you should be so much higher, okay? So I was then supplemented with testosterone, and I'm like, damn. That was an area of my life I didn't know I was out of balance in. And now that I've found balance, wow, I have got so much more energy about myself, and I was a lot more relaxed. I didn't overreact. I could sleep. In fact, one guy that I referred on to the endocrinologist, the first thing he did was when he got the testosterone balanced, he slept for 16 hours a day for 10 days. Wow. and he lost 6 to 8 kilos, because when you've got too much cortisol in your system, your body holds on to fat because you're in a state of stress. You don't know when you're going to get your next meal. So that survival state makes you hang on to fat. The right amount of testosterone stimulates your muscle mass, loses the amount of fat that you're hanging on to. And that was the pivotal point where I'm like, well, if that was an area I was out of balance in, I wonder if there's any other areas I'm out of balance. And then when I was taken out of that position of fatigue, and I should have added that earlier, you've got to break the isolation, but you also need to take people out of their position of fatigue, because they've been in that isolated state for so long. They're often in that position of fatigue. So you've got to give them something to give them more energy and more options, right? And for me, I found that in seeing the endocrinologist, right? And then I had the energy to then engage with a psychologist and go down that and be disappointed for a period of time, but that was okay because I had energy to burn. I wasn't in survival mode. So that was like a massive thing that blokes don't look at. Hormone levels, especially those guys that do their job for extra long, extra hard, extra focused, nothing else matters but that. That's great. That's cortisol. Too much, too long, adrenal fatigue, and you stop enjoying life, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about healers, this is one of the other aspects that I never would have considered, is looking at these broader medical dimensions and looking at what's going on, not just in my mind, but in my body. And as you mentioned, it's a multifaceted process that you've gone through, and some of it, perhaps the finishing line and the end of it wasn't apparent, and it was hard work, and you weren't getting the results you wanted until you got through to the more advanced stages and you figured it out yourself.
Well, actually, winding it back to what you asked, like, did you ever give yourself credit for things? It was once, because I worked at Mates for Mates for years, and like I said, there was 1 to 2 guys a week coming up saying, "Do you remember that conversation we had?" I'm like, "No, but yeah, He says, "Well, I had everything I needed to kill myself in the car, and because you said, 'Are you going to be around next week?' And I said, 'Yes,' I didn't actually do it." And that was just like one small example. And this was happening, once, twice weekly. It was when I started, and like I said, I worked there for years. When I started seeing these things stacking up, I realized that, that 2-second opportunity that I had when that part of me put a hand on my own shoulder and said, "There's never a convenient time to be yourself." And that came, like I said, at an incredible cost. Job of my perspective at the time was that job was the job I was going to have for the rest of my life. Okay. And I didn't know at that point, but when I raised my hand several years later, I'd be in a position that would, save more lives than I ever could have in the battle space. And so I'm really glad for my military service, because that was able to put me at the table with those men and women who had served, because veterans don't often speak to civilians the way they speak to other veterans. So it was when things started to sort of stack up, I'd sort of seen myself as a bit of a failure, I suppose, that, I got kicked out of this job that I loved. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. And then when I started, I guess my own healing process, and then part of that was helping other people in that process, then I realized that if I suppressed who I was, things might have worked out, more conveniently in the short term, but I wouldn't have been able to be such a powerful influence in those people that I cared about, lives of the people I cared about.
Can't argue with that. That's a hell of a commitment, hell of a courageous thing you did back then when you put your hand up, I've got to say. Thinking about that for the last 30 or 40 minutes, and it changed the course of your military career. But that's what serves you now.
It's just funny how it works. I can't say that I had any sense of awareness. I just knew that if Tim was going to be Tim, he had to be Tim. And I can say to people listening, it's going to come at a cost to be yourself. There's no one gets out alive. It'll come at a cost, but whatever it costs you, you are going to get back 1,000-fold. You just don't see it yet, and you haven't let the time elapse, and so you can see it. So you really do sort of need to pick a side, and then conduct yourself in such a way where you don't do things in isolation. You do things, connected into the herd, which is what I'm learning more and more, these days.
Tim, your work continues, of course, on your website, Commando in Your Corner, and also your book, Fight, Flight, Feel.
The coffee I made you today.
Yeah.
I made it out of the same stovetop cooker that I had in Afghanistan. Can you see that?
I've seen that photo.
Yeah, I'm just opening up the book now, showing that. Yeah, so that coffee cooker there, that's why there's still a bit of can paint on it, even now. The handle's fallen off. It's umpteen years old.
It looks like it's been around a few brews, a few battles.
So there you go. That was a bit of history in that cup of coffee.
So tell me about the book.
Okay, well, it asks the question, what if something already inside of you could change everything outside of you? And I really made it for people that it's a book about building yourself up, making yourself powerful from absolutely nothing. If you've got a name and you've got breath, then it shows you how to build yourself up from that. And then it comes a certain pivot point where you realize part of my, building up process is building others up as well. Because, I can have enough for me, that's fine. But then when I was writing this in the book, I'd say, I'd build myself up. I've got enough for me, but if my team's having a bad day, that means I'm having a bad day. So I realized then that being adequate's not an option. You had to be abundant. We're here to have an abundant life, having more than what we need. Because then we can be generous, And, my favorite saying is, I don't give of myself, I give of my abundance. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because some of the nastiest people have come from the nicest people, in the way that nice people think I've got to help others. And let's say they're at 100% and their sense of duty to others go, well, I'm going to give 10% to that other person, but that puts me down to 90%, and you better do something with that. And they'll keep giving till I get to a point where I go, you know what, screw the world. I've been screwed over so many times, therefore I can screw others over. All right. So my way of thinking these days, and I almost went down that path, but my way of thinking these days is invest in yourself, create an abundance. I'm more than what you need. So let's say I make 200% of more than what I need through physical, spiritual disciplines, right? Then I can give 20, 30% away a day consistently over time, and it doesn't matter what other people do with it. They can like me, hate me, tell me to F off. It doesn't matter. The point is it's being put out there, and I can get more done and be more generous if I give of my abundance, not of myself. So very much the idea of, work on yourself, create more than what you need. You're not sweating the small stuff, and then you can just give stuff away. And, you'll probably give like 1,000 things away before you get one person to go, oh, wow, that was really what I needed. But there's no way you'll get to that point of 1,000 if you're just giving of yourself. So asking the question, who am I? What am I doing? And, one thing my project that I'm working on right now is workshops in high schools, senior high schools, where there's nowhere on the spreadsheet that tells kids that you become powerful when your actions line up with your intentions. And the deeper you go into yourself or your intentions, the more powerful that action becomes. And this is what Destiny's Path is. Not, okay, I've got certain grades in certain subjects that'll get me certain courses in unis, and if I didn't get those grades, I'll go other courses. This is about, lining your actions up with your intentions, creating power, creating self-expression, creating freedom within that space. And then also knowing if you're on that powerful path, if you're on the way to real power, you're going to meet real opposition. Okay? No one talks about this. They say, follow your destiny, rise up, go off into the sunset. No, you are going to get your ass kicked 6 ways from Sunday on your way there, because as you become powerful, when you're small, you're easily taken from. And without knowing it right now, there's plenty of people in your world that have a vested interest in keeping you small. And there's also stuff inside of you that wants to keep you small. So as you step up, you're going to meet so much resistance. So a lot of my talks, when I'm talking about destiny, I talk about, okay, this is how you connect yourself, but then 3/4 of the talk is talking about what I call energy vampires, people that are going to take from you because while you're small, you're an easy meal, mm-hmm. Okay? But the good news is you're only going to need to outgrow them once. Mm-hmm. So there's one thing to tell, especially young people, to follow your destiny. It's another thing opening their eyes to the opposition you will be facing. And you know what? You can actually, when you know about it, you can actually use it as, oh, this is actually telling me I'm going in the right direction. Okay, because and once I become powerful, these people can't touch me. It's just, this is This is telling me I am on the right path, as opposed to, it's just day after day resistance. I don't see why. Let's just do what everyone else is doing. I'll let other people tell me what to do, as opposed to me telling me what to do. And also, like, I discovered there's a hell of a cost in being yourself. But if you don't let it go full circle, you'll never see the 1,000% that's waiting there for you once you have mastered those things that make you you. You don't have to be the best in the world at doing what you do, but you do have to master those things. And it's that mastery that then will make the world the better place.
Tim, your journey is fascinating. I think we could talk for another couple of hours here, and I could dig into so many more areas. We can
do a revisit. That often happens. We'll do a podcast and we just do a revisit a few months later.
I really appreciate your time, mate, and delving into some more in the future for sure. Thank you for sharing your struggles. Thank you for sharing the stories of bullying and the hard times in Army that led to the end of your career, and tough times after you come out the other side, because that's so much a part of what it is, and what you've been through and what you've come through and what you're doing now for veterans of this country. So I really do appreciate it, mate. I want to wrap up with a couple of questions that I ask all my guests, just to neatly wrap things up. The first one there is the proudest moment from your Army career.
Proudest moment would probably be after years of having this question mark above my head, guys coming up and going, you know what, we're sorry we believed all the BS. That was a real game changer, because up until that time I had a sort of resistance to others, because I just saw other people as something that's going to try and get one over on me. So for them to actually let me drop my guard and be myself, that was amazing.
Yeah. Now, those men and women going through transitions in the future, if there's one piece of advice you could give to someone early on their career on planning for their eventual transition out of service, what would that be?
Okay, well, first up, mechanical tools like MCARM through the Gallipoli Medical. It's online, and it just helps articulate the things you can't articulate yourself, because there's something going on, but you can't articulate it, right? Those tools are a really good mechanical way to give you a target indication, because what's going to happen, first thing in a contact is you've got to find out where the bullets are coming from, okay? And once you know where they're coming from, you're like, right, well, here's our set of actions to go. But if you don't know where they're coming from, you have to retreat. You retreat, and this is what people end up doing. I'm on the civilian street, I'm in a lot of pain, I'm just going to retreat, okay? Into the bottle, into a substance, into my own, drop off the map, and in isolation I can self-justify everything. So the trick to breaking that is asking the question, and this goes for anything you're trying to get through. Ask yourself the question, how many other people are in my position? So if I can make a way forward for me, I'm going to be able to make a way forward for others. Game changer.
Connection and sharing. We're part of the community here.
It's not a link back into community.
It's not a solo journey.
Yeah.
It's not. Tim, any advice for people on transitioning out, on adjusting to civilian life again?
Have a place where you can meet up with a veteran social group. Okay, that is, and feel what it is to let your real self out. And a good veteran social group will act like a trampoline. And this is my acid test. Do you leave with more energy than you went in with? Do you leave from that group with more energy than you went in with? So it springs you back into, or any sort of group you're hanging out with for that matter, but you want to be able to hold that energy and courage of being yourself for longer, when you engage with those people. So start an inner compass on when you find yourself being yourself, or when you find yourself repressing yourself, because you can go years repressing the stuff that you think you're doing everyone a favor by not talking about. And learn the power of articulation, because if you can articulate your journey, it's going to be powerful for you, but it's also going to be powerful for all those other people as well. So that is why I say, even though I've got 6 pages of weapons I'm qualified in, the most powerful thing on the planet's not a weapon, it's a conversation. And credit to guys like yourself who create platforms for these conversations to be shared, because when you can articulate this stuff, you start tapping into some very powerful universal truths, not truths that you've made up, but truths that you've discovered. And just like I've discovered it, and then I can just point it out, because these things were true before I was born, they're going to be true after I'm dead. And if we can sort of raise a finger and say, look at that truth, a pointed finger, look at that truth, that's your reference point. You can like or hate me, it doesn't really matter. That's going to be there and that's going to serve you. So that's the power of articulation for what you're currently going through, if that helps.
It does. Tim, if we fast forward 10 years and we look back on today, what will the Army career of Tim Thomas have meant for your life's journey?
I don't understand that question. I know. So can you maybe say that another way?
Certainly. So looking back from 10, 15, 20 years in the future, your time in Army, what's that meant to your life?
Right. Okay. So there's a bit of a saying, the Army ages you in dog years. Like 1 year in is like 7 years out. So like if you serve for 5 years, it's like it depreciates your body the same as 5 times 7, 35 years, right? That said, you can really accumulate a lot of learning and knowledge. So I'm very grateful for the Army to help evolve my learning in such a way that I couldn't escape from it. I couldn't just ignore it. So there was a lot of lessons in there that I would have certainly could have procrastinated for another 40 years and not learnt. So it means, because I was hurt in a lot of ways, but that's made me a really good healer. Yeah, that's what I would be saying. Yeah, and you know what? Or the other way to say it is, the shit you go through can be turned into fertilizer. It can make your life more productive and other people's life more productive.
Yeah, without going through it, it's hard to share those experiences. Tim, where can anyone listening today reach out and make contact with you?
All right, so I've got my website, yourcommando.com. You can reach out through there. I have done, if there's any veterans sort of looking to start their healing journey, I've done a 3-part video series on my YouTube channel called Commando in Your Corner. And the 3-part series is called The Secrets of Pain, because I discovered pain works in a secret way that it's hidden from us, but once it's pointed out, you're like, oh, damn, that's true, but I never actually knew that. So I've done this, all the stuff that I used to do, all the powerful conversations I had at Mates for Mates, is in that 3-part series on that YouTube channel, Secrets of Pain, Commando in Your Corner. So that is, even if it's just a partner looking at it, you'll understand it's everything I wish I knew when I started my healing journey. And that's why I've made the video. That's going to be, true for as long as humans are humans.
Tim, we'll link to it in the show notes. Just want to say a huge thanks again for coming on and sharing your journey. There's so much in it for so many people, I think. Thank you.
Credit to you, Matt. You're bringing this to the people, and let's hope. And I believe we have done some good today.
Thank you, Tim. All the best. Cheers.
Thank you. No worries.